Judge disrespects black woman in court until her Supreme Court husband walked into courtroom. She stood alone in court, disrespected and humiliated, until the doors flew open and her husband, a Supreme Court justice, walked in. What happened? Next, the whole courtroom couldn't believe their eyes. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more jaw-dropping real-life stories that will leave you speechless. It was a cloudy Tuesday morning in a small southern courtroom in Georgia. The wooden benches were half filled with people waiting for their hearings, while clerks moved papers behind the judge's bench. But when Amara Johnson, a black woman in her mid-30s, stepped into the courtroom, whispers followed. She wore a navy blue blazer, matching pants, and simple heels. Her natural curls framed her face with quiet confidence. But that confidence didn't matter to Judge Raymond Collins, a stern, white-haired man known for being tough especially on people he considered outsiders. Amara had been wrongly issued a parking violation for a disabled spot she wasn't parked in, but the case had somehow escalated. She came to court representing herself, without a lawyer, simply seeking justice. From the moment she stood before the bench, Judge Collins looked at her with irritation. "State your name," he barked. "Amara Johnson, Your Honor," she said calmly. He looked her over like she didn't belong there. "Are you a lawyer?" "No, Your Honor, I'm representing myself." He scoffed loudly, flipping through the papers. "This should be quick then," he muttered. Gasps filled the courtroom. As Amara tried to explain that the violation had been wrongly applied and provided proof, the judge interrupted her repeatedly. He mocked her statements. He questioned her tone. "You people always find ways to waste the court's time," he said loudly. Silence. Then murmurs. Someone in the back of the courtroom whispered, "Did he really just say that?" Amara froze for a moment, her face tightening. She took a deep breath, holding back tears, but never lowered her head. "Your Honor," she said, "I am not here to waste anyone's time. I have video footage and statements that I said enough." The judge snapped. "Either you sit down and accept the fine, or I'll hold you in contempt." And just as he slammed his gavel, the courtroom doors slowly creaked open. Everyone turned to the door. The light from outside poured in, outlining a tall, dark-skinned man in a black overcoat. He walked in slowly, every step echoing across the room. "Apologies, Your Honor," the man said in a deep, calm voice, "but I believe there has been a grave error here." Judge Collins squinted. "And who are you supposed to be?" The man stepped forward. "Justice Nathaniel Brooks, United States Supreme Court." The judge went pale. Justice Brooks was known, nationally a brilliant legal mind, and one of only 3 black justices on the highest court in the country. Media often described him as the man who never lost his calm, but never missed a blow. "I'm here not as a justice today," he said, glancing lovingly at Amara, "but as this woman's husband." Murmurs exploded in the courtroom. Phones came out. Pictures were taken. Judge Collins tried to recover. I wasn't aware." "You didn't need to be," Justice Brooks replied sharply, "but you should have been respectful to a citizen in your courtroom, especially one representing herself with truth and dignity." Judge Collins stammered, "This is highly irregular." Brooks stepped closer. "It's highly irregular that a judge tells a black woman, 'You people,' in a court of law in 2025. That's what's irregular." The crowd clapped softly, quickly hushed. Judge Collins tried to assert authority again. "This is my courtroom." Justice Brooks nodded. "Not today." He turned to the clerk. "Please bring the evidence." She tried to present. A clerk, a young woman in her 20s, moved quickly and brought the USB drive from Amara's bag. The footage played, clear as day. Amara's car was parked in a regular spot. Another car had parked in the disabled space, and the ticketing officer had written the wrong plate number. It was an open and shut case. Judge Collins cleared his throat. This appears to be a misunderstanding." Brooks's stare was razor sharp. Amara spoke finally. "It's not just a misunderstanding, it's how you treated me, the way you looked at me, like I didn't belong." The room fell silent. Justice Brooks wasn't finished. He turned to the quiet, crowded courtroom, and spoke in a calm but commanding voice. "How many of you have been here before, and felt like you didn't stand a chance?" For a moment, there was silence. Then, one by one, hands started to rise. Some high, some hesitant. A middle-aged black man in a postal uniform raised his hand. A Latina mother holding her child nodded quietly. A young teen in the corner, there for a traffic ticket, looked up and raised her hand too. "This," Brooks said, "is the real problem. It's not just about Amara. It's about every person who steps into this room, thinking their voice won't matter because of how they look or where they come from. And that's not justice. That's failure." Judge Collins sat frozen, the weight of the moment pressing against him. For years, he'd ruled this courtroom like a king in his castle. But today, the walls were crumbling. Amara, with a newfound strength in her voice, stepped forward. "I came here prepared. I had my evidence. I followed the rules. But all it took was one look from you to know I'd already lost in your eyes." A woman in the front row whispered, "Amen." "I'm not asking for special treatment," Amara continued. "Just equal treatment, respect, that's it. That should be the bare minimum in a court of law." Justice Brooks added firmly, "You know why she didn't come in here with a lawyer? Because she believed this court would be fair. Because she believed in the system. That belief was nearly shattered today. And if someone like her, educated, composed, and informed, can be treated this way, imagine what happens to those without resources or support. Someone in the back clapped. Then another. The sound spread, slow but steady, like a rising wave of agreement. Soon, the entire courtroom erupted in applause. Even the court officers glanced around, unsure whether to intervene or join in. The judge, clearly shaken, banged his gavel once. Order. I demand order in this courtroom. But it was too late. The courtroom had seen the truth, and truth echoed louder than a wooden gavel, trying to save face. Judge Collins mumbled, "This appears to be a misunderstanding." Brooks stared directly at him. "No, Judge, this was a pattern, one that finally got exposed." With nowhere to hide, Judge Collins cleared his throat. "Case dismissed. Miss Johnson, I apologize." Amara looked straight at him, her voice steady. She replied, "You can keep your apology. Just treat the next woman better." And with that, she turned and walked away, not just as a woman who won her case, but as a woman who reclaimed her dignity in front of a system that tried to deny it. It was a moment that would not be forgotten, a moment when truth was louder than authority, a moment when justice finally stood tall in heels and with a spine of steel. News of what happened in that Georgia courtroom spread like wildfire. By nightfall, #Justice for Amara was the #1 trending hashtag on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Clips of Justice Brooks calmly standing beside his wife and calling out Judge Collins had gone viral. The story appeared on every major networks, CNN, MSNBC, The Shade Room, even late-night comedy shows. But this wasn't a joke. This was real, raw, and powerful. The headlines read, "Supreme Court Justice walks into courtroom after wife faces racial disrespect. Judge Collins under fire for bias against black woman. Amara Johnson, the new face of everyday justice." News anchors and legal experts weighed in. Some were stunned. Others weren't surprised at all. "This kind of judicial bias has been going on for decades," said attorney Lauren Monroe on MSNBC. "The difference now is, someone with power finally walked into the room." People across the country were outraged not just by the judge's behavior, but by how easily it could have gone unnoticed if not for Amara's husband stepping in. The Georgia State Bar launched an immediate investigation. Civil rights organizations like the NAACP and the Southern Poverty Law Center issued formal complaints. Judge Collins, once respected in local legal circles, now faced national scrutiny. His past cases were reopened for review. Lawyers who had long suspected his bias finally felt empowered to speak out. Meanwhile, Amara, who had once walked into the courtroom simply to clear up a parking ticket, found herself in a new and unexpected spotlight. She appeared on Good Morning America, The View, and even gave an exclusive interview on Oprah's streaming network. But she wasn't interested in fame. "I didn't ask my husband to come to court," she said during her GMA appearance. "He saw something was wrong and chose to speak up. But let's be clear, Avon, if he hadn't walked in, I wasn't backing down because right is right." Audiences were captivated by her strength. She wasn't a politician, a lawyer, or a public figure. She was a regular woman, yet her calm, powerful stance against injustice made her an instant symbol of resilience. School civics teachers started using her court footage to teach students about civil rights. Legal podcasts dissected the moment, calling it a masterclass in courtroom grace and power. But Amara's biggest impact came offline. Women began sending her letters, emails, messages. One woman wrote, "I've been afraid to fight my landlord in court, but after watching you, I feel like maybe I can." Another said, "You reminded me that dignity matters even when they try to take it from you." Judge Collins, trying to save his reputation, held a press conference weeks later. He read from a paper, voice shaking, "I deeply regret my tone and language in court. I did not intend harm." But few believed his apology. Many saw it as damage control. Protesters marched outside his courthouse, holding signs. "Bias in black robes is still bias. Respect is not optional." Amara spoke, we listened. Eventually, under public pressure and growing legal challenges, Judge Collins was placed on administrative leave pending further review, and while many celebrated that, Amara herself had a different focus. "Removing one judge doesn't fix the system," she said, "but it starts the conversation." What began as a simple fight for a dismissed ticket had become something much greater, national awakening, and Amara stood quietly in the center of it all, not as a victim, but as a force of change. News of what happened in that Georgia courtroom spread like wildfire. By nightfall, #Justice for Amara was the #1 trending hashtag across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Clips of Justice Brooks calmly standing beside his wife and calling out Judge Collins were shared millions of times. It wasn't just a viral moment, it was a cultural flashpoint. Major news networks picked it up instantly. CNN led with it during prime time. Legal experts debated it on MSNBC. Even late-night comedy shows referenced it, though there was nothing funny about what had taken place. The headlines were powerful and unignorable, Supreme Court Justice shocks local courtroom. Georgia judge faces backlash after disrespecting black woman. Amara Johnson's courtroom courage inspires nation. Everywhere you looked, people were talking about the quiet dignity of a woman who stood her ground and the husband who stood by her side without saying a word more than necessary. Legal experts immediately responded. This kind of judicial bias isn't new, said attorney Lauren Monroe on a primetime news panel. What's new is that someone powerful finally witnessed it and did something about it. Others agreed that the moment had exposed what many marginalized people already knew. Sometimes, justice depends more on who walks into the room than what the law says. The Georgia State Bar Association acted quickly. Within 48 hours, a formal review of Judge Collins's courtroom conduct was underway. Civil rights groups like the NAACP and Southern Poverty Law Center filed their own complaints. The Chief Justice of Georgia's Supreme Court announced that Judge Collins's entire case history would be re-examined for signs of racial or gender-based bias. Suddenly, the man who once sat on the bench with unchecked authority was under a microscope. Meanwhile, Amara's life had completely changed. She had come to court just to clear a parking ticket. Now she was receiving interview requests from Good Morning America, The View, The Breakfast Club, and even Oprah Winfrey's OWN network. Yet despite all the media attention, Amara remained grounded and thoughtful. I didn't ask Nathaniel to come to court, she said during a sit-down with GMA. He saw something wrong and acted. But even if he hadn't shown up, I wasn't going to back down because right is right and truth matters. Viewers across the country were captivated by her strength. She wasn't shouting, she wasn't dramatic, but her calm defiance in the face of humiliation reminded people that real courage doesn't need to be loud, just needs to be consistent. People began sending her letters and messages by the thousands. One woman from Alabama wrote, I was scared to fight my employer in court, but after watching you, I feel like maybe I can. A college student messaged, you reminded me that I'm worth defending, even if no one believes me at first. Amara had become a quiet revolution. Law professors began using her case in ethics classes. High school teachers played clips of the courtroom moment in civics lessons. Legal podcasts broke down every word Justice Brooks had said. This one, host said, was a masterclass in dignity, married to power and how justice should work. Judge Collins, now a man under fire, tried to defend himself. Weeks after the incident, he called a press conference. Reading stiffly from a prepared statement, he said, I deeply regret my tone and words used in court. I did not intend harm, and offer a sincere apology to Mrs. Johnson and her family. But the public wasn't convinced. Protesters gathered outside his courthouse the next day, holding signs that read, bias in black robes is still bias. Judges should uplift, not tear down. Amara spoke. We heard even lawyers who had once feared speaking out against Collins now found the courage. Several attorneys filed motions to revisit past cases where Collins had shown harsh or dismissive behavior, especially against women of color. Old wounds reopened. Former court staff anonymously revealed stories of inappropriate comments and double standards behind the bench. Eventually, the pressure was too much. The state's Judicial Review Board placed Judge Collins on administrative leave. His future as a judge was uncertain, but his legacy was already tarnished. Still, for Amara, it was never about destroying someone. It was about rebuilding something. I don't want revenge, she told Oprah in a heartfelt interview. I want fairness. I want my daughter and every little black girl to walk into a courtroom and know she'll be heard, not judged before she even speaks. She meant it. And while the system was slow to change, Amara had already lit a spark. What started as a quiet act of standing up for herself had become a national conversation. About race, about power, about how the courtroom, a place meant for fairness, could sometimes become a battleground. But that day, Amara didn't just win her case. She helped change the court of public opinion, and that was a victory far greater than any judge's gavel could silence.